How's it going, everybody? This is Sam with Sam Shady Sports once again. Today we are discussing the hiring of Matt Eburflus with Chicago, one of my favorite coordinators in the NFL, mainly due to his abilities to put players in positions to succeed despite scheme and role. So let's get into it. He began his career way back in 1992, despite being a relatively young head coach. Um, he was still in college when he began coaching. He began as a student assistant. In 1993, he graduated and moved up to being a graduate assistant. In 1994, he received a rather large promotion, showing how quickly he earned respect within the coaching uh, circles within Toledo's staff. He was promoted to outside linebacker coach and recruiting coordinator, uh, a position that he held for 2 seasons before going back to focusing on outside linebackers strictly. He would hold a position with Toledo until 2001, spending his last two seasons as defensive backs coach before receiving his first chance to run his own defense with Missouri. He would stay with Missouri for another 8 seasons um, and have a very successful run, enough to the point where he garnered NFL attention. In 2009, when Eric Mangini took over the Cleveland Browns, he hired Eberflus to come in and coach his linebackers. Eberflus would stay in Cleveland for 2 seasons with Mangini until Mangini was fired. At this point, that's when Eberflus's career took a turn for the better. He was already on the up and up prior to this, but it was in Dallas where he landed underneath coordinator Rob Ryan and head coach Jason Garrett, where his career really took off. Um, at first, he just started out as another linebacker coach, nothing special, and he would stick around through Rob Ryan being let go in favor of Monty Kiffin, who only stayed a season, and then Rod Marinelli took over for Kiffin. When Marinelli took over, things changed a little bit, and ultimately, over time, Eberflus continued to gain respect within the Dallas's locker room. Uh, in Marinelli's third season as defensive coordinator, he handed Eberflus a rather large role in his defense as passing game coordinator while still continuing to coach linebackers. Um, Eberflus showed his value in just 2 seasons. By 2018, Frank Reich had been hired as the head coach with the Indianapolis Colts, and it was then that Eberflus was able to achieve an NFL coordinator position for the first time. He was hired by Indianapolis to run their defense, despite most of their players realistically being under or undeveloped draft picks, as well as many spare parts, guys that were journeymen prior to joining Indianapolis and had never really started or been very successful as role players prior to this. Guys like Danico Autry, Pierre Desir, Darius Leonard was a rookie that year. Um, Things like that. Um, if they needed any indication that they had made the right decision in Eberflus, all they had to do was look at Darius Leonard. Darius Leonard, as a rookie, may have been passed over for the Pro Bowl in his first season, but he made first team All Pro as a rookie. That is unheard of. In his second season, the Pro Bowl voters got wise to the fact that he was, in fact, one of the best linebackers in the league already as a second year player, and he has since been voted to 3 straight Pro Bowls and garnered 2 more first team All Pro votes in year 3 and 4. Um, it wasn't long before he started gaining NFL head coach consideration because of the fact that he is so good at putting players in a position to succeed. Other teams were looking at guys like I said, Darius Leonard, Pierre Desir, Danico Autry, guys that had not produced in other stops and yet came to Indianapolis and all of a sudden were quality starters for him. Danico Autry produced 9 sacks in his first season for Indianapolis. Pierre Desir had never done really much of anything with any team prior to joining Indianapolis and Eburflus coaching him. And then all of a sudden he comes out as a quality starter for 2 seasons before just Sear is cut ultimately and they move on in another direction. Kenny Moore was a second year player, and all of a sudden he developed into a quality starter very quickly. And at this point, he could be regarded as one of the better young corners in the league in only his fifth season. Um, my big question for Eberflus, much like any other defensive head coach, is who's going to be your offensive coordinator? Obviously, you take the job in Chicago because you have quality pieces on defense. But the key here, and always will be the key for Chicago, is the development of Justin Fields. And Eberflus knows that. Chicago would not have hired him if he did not have a clear cut plan as to who was going to come in and develop Fields for him. His career depends on the development of Justin Fields, regardless of what his defense might or might not do over the next few years. Even with guys like Roquan Smith, Eddie Jackson, and Khalil Mack at his disposal, there is no way this defense can carry an offense in today's modern NFL. It just won't happen. The passing games, even on the worst teams, are too good, and the depth across the NFL is simply just at another level that it wasn't years ago when defenses used to rule the world. Um, as of right now, reports are circulating that his top candidate for offensive coordinator is quarterback coach Luke Getsy of the Green Bay Packers. The only problem with that is I strongly feel that Getsy has other offers on the table. First of which being from Denver as the offensive coordinator under Nathaniel Hackett, the man who he's coached next to in Green Bay for several seasons. And then, obviously, from Green Bay as well. He could potentially replace Nathaniel Hackett with Green Bay and then eventually find himself as a head coach candidate down the line, or he could find himself coaching Jordan Love and watch as Aaron Rodgers walks out the door. It's a very tough decision for Getsy, I would believe. I think there are questions about all three positions that he has interest in and have interest in him. And it's really a question of which coach do you think lasts the longest in their current position? Do you think Nathaniel Hackett is going to be successful in Denver? Do you think Matt Eberflus is going to be successful in Chicago? Or do you think that Matt LaFleur is one of the coaches that has garnered the respect in Green Bay that he deserves and will be sticking around in Green Bay for years to come? And honestly, I think he ultimately lands in Denver. And let me tell you why. I think Denver ultimately is going to go all in for Aaron Rodgers, and ultimately that's Nathaniel Hackett's best path to success. On top of that, Rodgers is a big fan of Getsy. So I think Hackett and Denver are going to do everything they can to try and get Getsy here in Denver so they can help lure Aaron Rodgers. With that being said, if Getsy's off the table for Eberflus, who can he turn to? Well, the good news for him is he has ties to many different players, many different coaches that are not currently coordinators that may be interested in going back to running an offense, including Mike Groh, the wide receivers coach for the Indianapolis Colts. Mike Groh was a offensive coordinator in Philadelphia under Doug Peterson for a couple seasons, and he didn't have the greatest run, but I don't know that it was necessarily all his fault. We never really had much talent at wide receiver, and Carson Wentz was at a very odd point in his career in which things took a turn for the worse for Groh, and he found himself out of the town. Another man that could be in the running is Kevin Patullo, currently a coach for Philadelphia, but had been with Indianapolis for years prior to this. He hasn't had a chance to run an offense in the NFL yet, but I believe if he were given the offer from Eberflus, he would jump all over it, especially with the chance to work with Tariq Cohen, David Montgomery, Darnell Mooney, and Justin Fields. That's a pretty good base to build off of on offense. But the truth is, I honestly am not sure how this one's going to shake out. Maybe Getsy sees that Fields could be a great star, and he believes in him more than he believes in Jordan Love. Maybe he doesn't want to deal with the uncertainty of what happens in Denver at their quarterback position, or in Green Bay with what happens with their quarterback position. Whatever the answer may be here, this is the most crucial hire for Eberflus. If he doesn't get this right, there is a large chance that he will find himself back as a coordinator in 3 to 4 years. That's just the fact of the NFL. If you don't have quarterback play, you don't succeed. It doesn't matter if you're the greatest defensive mind ever in the face of the NFL. Look at what happened with Vic Fangio, and he had Teddy Bridgewater in 2021, a fairly decent game manager who actually had a career season. Um, Nobody wants to end up like that as a head coach. So he knows that it is super important for him to find the right candidate here. Um, I, I think that his intelligence is being shown by the player or by the coaches that he is targeting. Another name that has been reported and circulated in the rumor mill is Rich Bisaccia, which would make a lot of sense. They spent 5 years together in Dallas, where Rich Bisaccia was the assistant head coach and special teams coordinator before leaving for Las Vegas to join John Gruden in the same capacity. Um, he then took over as the interim head coach and went 7-5 in his first season ever as a head coach. That's valuable experience for a guy like Eberflus who has never been a head coach, not in college or in the NFL. Um, maybe things would have been different had he not had the NFL aspirations and decided to join Cleveland, and he likely would have ended up a head coach at the college level prior to joining the NFL. But the thing is, he made the right choice because had he done the head coach route in the college game, it would have taken him much longer to distinguish himself as an NFL candidate than it would if he just jumps into the NFL and takes a coordinator like position like he did. Um, because of that, I think that bringing in Bisaccia is such a good move that it's showing that he understands that he needs a good supporting staff around him in order to succeed. He's watched as other coaches have failed due to the fact that they didn't have the right people in place to make it work. So he doesn't want to be that way. And I honestly think he might be one of the more successful first time head coaches coming out of this hiring class. He's been one of the most clutch defensive coordinators for 4 seasons now. A guy who has managed to coach players to a higher level than they had ever played prior to joining his staff. And he now has the most talented defensive roster he's ever had in his time in the NFL. Think about that for a minute. Just imagine the ways he's going to use Khalil Mack to wreak havoc on opposing offenses. Just imagine what happens with Eddie Jackson, who has proven himself to be a huge playmaker and shown a penchant for getting his hand on the ball and getting turnovers when it's needed the most. Just imagine what he does with the rest of the defense. Guys we may not even know yet who are depth players on that roster that may develop into quality starters because of the coaching they are now receiving. That's how good Eberflus really is, despite being a first time NFL coordinator in Indianapolis and a first time head coach in Chicago. I think he owes a lot of credit to Dallas. That cycle of defensive coordinators that he worked under, whether it was Rob Ryan, who ran a 3-4, or it was Monty Kiffin, who ran a version of the cover two scheme that Lovie Smith is known for, or whether it was Rod Marinelli, who also runs a version of the cover two. He saw many different versions of defense and many different defensive philosophies, which has helped him to determine that a multiple front scheme where he can move players where they can be successful is the best course of action for him. I honestly am excited to see what he does in Chicago with all the talent they have on defense. I always thought that their defense has underperformed despite the fact that they have several all pro and Pro Bowl level players on nearly every level of the defense. And I'm excited to see Eberflus there. I'm also excited to see who he brings in as offensive coordinator and to see if he actually snatches Bisaccia from Las Vegas. Let me know what you think in the comments below. This is all I've got for today. Once again, like, comment, subscribe. I appreciate all the support, and I hope you stick with the channel. Stay tuned as we continue to grow and I learn more about this YouTube thing and continue to develop videos that are much better quality than what I have so far. If you have any suggestions, I am all ears. Please drop them in the comments. Shoot me an Insta message. Also, check out my website, samshadysports.wordpress.com. You can catch me on Discord, Sam Shady Sports. You can also catch me on Twitter, Sam Shady Sports. Big shout out to Hunter Doyle, Coach Alley, and Steve Hyder of Gate City Sports Media. If it weren't for those guys, I probably wouldn't even be doing this. So it's up to you to determine if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Um, I really cannot thank them enough, though. They've been huge supporters of this entire thing, and they've been giving me pointers at every turn. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate all your help.